Adding extra light to something can be a great way to plus it up and make something ordinary look extraordinary. Of course, you have to actually, do it within reason, because if you overdo it, well, you can easily overdo it. To continue to increase their footprint at retail, Hasbro quickly introduced to the Power of the Force 2 line Deluxe SKUs, because this was going to allow them to have more square footage and further have better sales. The best way to do this is to add plussed up figures. So the first range of Deluxe figures we got were a little what you would call off-screen. Stormtroopers with giant crowd control arms, Han Solo with a giant jetpack. Not exactly for me. I'm not really for the just off-camera Hasbro made-up toy stuff. I like the stuff from the movies. So the next attempt at doing Deluxe figures was adding lights. And that became the Electronic Power FX line. So it was pretty self-explanatory. You would get an action figure, usually a rehash of a figure from a single card, and they would have a light-up feature. And they would also include bases with cardboard cutouts from the back of the package. The blister, you would just literally cut it out, and then you could make a cool diorama. Most of the figures just included lights, but in the case of our favorite trash can talking droid, we also got sounds. So the very first figure in the modern line of R2-D2 with both lights and sounds, because, hey, it's R2-D2, why not? So I do like to do these figures in the exact order. It's kind of my anal part of collecting. So these FX figures were actually released in 2 different waves, and so I'm grouping them together for the video, but because of history and for historical accuracy, it's important to note that the first wave of FX figures came out right after wave 4 of the Power of the Force 2, the wave that had the Sand Trooper and Greedo and R5-D4. The second wave came out right where we are in this series, right after the Alderaan Fleet Trooper, as I call him. So we are right where we're supposed to be for wave 2 of Power FX figures. I'm just grouping them all together for, funsies. So wave 1 included 3 figures. You had your Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Vader, with light-up lightsaber. You had Obi-Wan Kenobi, also with light-up lightsaber, although interesting to note that the card art showed it in blue, but the figure had green. We'll get to that in a moment. And then we also had our lovable droid, R2-D2, which, as I noted, is the only figure in the assortment that also included sounds. Your beep, 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 boop, boop, boops. That was my impression of R2-D2. Stayed up all night working on that one. What do you think? The second wave, which came out here, where we are in the series, after the Fleet Trooper, the Alderaan Fleet Trooper, was Palpatine and Luke Skywalker, with light-up lightning and, again, lightsaber. So let's take a quick look at Wave 1. First, we have our Obi-Wan Ben Kenobi. So this figure is a sort of update, retool of the single-carded figure from Wave 1, where you have the cloak that goes over his body as one PVC piece, and then his right arm is retooled in order to have the electronics that light up the lightsaber, which is kind of similar to the vintage figure. And then he comes with half of a Death Star hangar bay, which when you combine with Darth Vader, who comes with the other half, and cut out the little scene on the back of the card, you can create their world-famous duel, which is actually pretty cool. Now, as I noted earlier, Obi-Wan has a bright green lightsaber. While we all know Jedis do carry green lightsabers, this wasn't introduced until Return of the Jedi and really expanded upon in Attack of the Clones. Well, I guess somewhat in Phantom Menace, but more so. And they've obviously made many Obi-Wan Kenobis with correct blue lightsabers when he's battling Darth Vader. Well, so why doesn't he have a blue lightsaber? Well, it actually comes down to logistics and cost. Blue LEDs are really, really, really expensive. Green and red are not. Now, I suppose they could have gone with maybe yellow, which is also a less expensive version as an homage to the original Kenner toy, but I guess because green lightsabers are common with Luke, he got a green lightsaber, and that's why. Although the card was photoshopped to have a blue lightsaber in the photo, which is kind of interesting because you're looking at the photo and looking at the figure at the same time on the front, and Something just doesn't match here. But for the kiddies that this was really meant for, it was all in funsies. And hey, why not? Because you got a light up figure. It's also interesting to note that for this scene, Obi-Wan always has his hood up. We would eventually get a hood up Obi-Wan, but this figure, in order to hide the battery pack, had his hood down. Vader didn't have this problem as much because he has a large cape and a large, I want to say large chest, large like robotic body, so it was kind of easy to hide the battery a little bit more with him than Obi-Wan by making his hood down in the back to hide it. R2-D2 was of course even easier. The battery is just inside of him, and he didn't have to have any weird proportions the way Obi-Wan and Vader did. They don't look at too bad, but don't spend too much time looking at them. You can definitely tell the proportions are a little out of whack. And R2 came with a more expanded base as well, since he was a smaller figure, so you got kind of like a little chunk of Tatooine, as well as the cardboard cutout that you could take out of the reverse of the card. This wasn't the only R2-D2 with lights and sounds. We would get one every couple of years in the line. It tended to be a standard refresh, and even we got lights and sounds on a standard R2 eventually. So much for Deluxe being a feature. The next wave, Emperor Palpatine and Luke Skywalker, which followed the Rebel Trooper, well, again, kind of exactly what we would expect, although Luke has a little bit of an interesting look to him. Much like Obi-Wan's hood needed to be down in order to accommodate the battery pack, well, Luke on Death Star 2 just has a, thin outfit on. So, yeah, he kind of got a cape.
Where do you even get a cape?
Yeah, Luke does wear a Jedi cloak in Jabba's palace. He definitely does not wear one on the Death Star, but, in order to hide that battery pack, his cloak became a cape. So you have Super Luke off to save the world. It's interesting to note about this Death Star 2 Luke, while it's one of the kind of quintessential Lukes as far as a total collection, Hasbro kind of had, I don't say it wasn't a hard time getting to this figure, but he didn't show up really for a long time. We did get a sort of very limited articulated one in the Final Jedi Duel 3-pack, which is actually coming up not too long. But most of the Jedi Luke figures done by Hasbro were the Jabba Palace version, which he's wearing a slightly different outfit. He has more of a tunic over the, sort of the one piece that he wears on the Death Star 2. And we got this figure over and over again, always as the Jedi Luke. It was interesting that the Death Star 2 look, which again is just different from the Jabba Palace look, would show up in other lines. So we got an Unleashed version, and we even got a version in the kiddie line, the Galactic Heroes, where you have Death Star 2, with the folded, shirt down like that. But we just couldn't seem to get this one as a basic figure. We did get our first carded version here in the Gold Saga, but again, he was very pre-posed in order to accommodate the action feature. It wasn't until the Legacy Collection that we actually finally got a articulated Death Star 2 Luke. So until then, we would have to make do with our caped Luke from the Power FX or our pre-posed version from the 3-pack. This Luke had an extended cardboard backdrop on his blister card reverse, so he could combine with Vader, the same Vader from the first one, and you would put his extended backdrop in there to make it Death Star 2. And speaking of the second Death Star, the ruler of said second Death Star, Emperor Palpatine himself, got an FX figure. This wasn't long after his initial release as a single-carded figure, which was in what the toy industry actually calls waiting for the bus pose. When you have a figure that's just kind of standing and not in any action, see the Justice League Unlimited line as an example. The toy industry tends to call these waiting for the bus figures because they look like that's what they're doing. So to do Palpatine in the FX series, he had open hands, an angry face, and the lights were embedded into his arms and would flicker back and forth to create a lightning effect. This was actually probably the best of the FX figures because his cloak naturally hid the battery, so he didn't need a cape. He came with a really cool Death Star window backdrop, which is one of the cooler of the little mini backdrops that you got. And since he came with Luke, you could torture the heck out of him with your Force lightning, or I don't know, have him be your nightlight. The figure would be slightly retooled for a Millennium minted coin figure, which came out the following year. It was essentially the same figure, except now the lightning was colored in blue, the electronic features were taken out, and he had a slightly retooled head. But again, now we had a non-electronic version of the lightning-wielding Palpatine, since the Waiting for the Bus version just came with a stick, because, all Sith Lords just love their walking sticks. Later Palpatine releases would come with both, where you could have interchangeable hands with lightning and the stick, because, that creates more play value and more different versions. Plus, it's more aggressive, and most boys like aggression play, when they smash their figures together. This Power FX Palpatine, without the lightning, when you unplug it, he's kind of got that, I'm coming for you, sleepwalking look or something. I always thought he looked really odd if he didn't have the lightning attached. It's kind of hard to pose because, it's got these big lights coming out. Now, it's also interesting to note that light-up features, while very common throughout Star Wars merchandise as a whole, as a category, Lego did a whole line of light-up lightsaber keychain figures, they didn't show up that much in Hasbro and Kenner's line. In fact, the next time we would have a Vader with a light-up lightsaber was 15 years later, when he had a Galactic Battle Game figure in the Darth Maul package there. This figure didn't need the giant backpack because the battery technology had gotten much better and the batteries could be inside of him. The figure would also get re-released in a Target Rise of Darth Vader pack with a reissue of his Frankenstein slab, and so people could have another crack at him. The Electronic Power FX line would finish with a X-Wing. This was the last time the branding was used on any Hasbro figure or vehicle in the Star Wars line, and then it was retired. So new deluxe figures were on their way, but this time without Power FX. It was fun while it lasted.